Hey, hello. Long time no see. Okay, so it's 12 noon or just gone. I'm a little bit late starting this stream. And I've started this early. I was going to do it about 1 in about an hour's time. But a lot has come out this morning in the Nicola Bulley inquest. So they started promptly at 10 a.m., so 2 hours ago. So there's 2 hours of testimony to catch up on. I've been following the live updates all morning. So it's very interesting, the things that have come out. So that's what we're going to do. And then I'm going to come back later when the coroner gives his verdict. So as soon as the coroner gives his verdict, I will be back live. All right, so we're just going to cover this morning. And then I think they're going to get all the witnesses done this morning. Then they're going to break. And the coroner is going to take a couple of hours to consider the evidence. And then he's going to come back. So that's my plan as well. I'll take a couple of hours and then come back as soon as that verdict is released. So that's the plan. Let's see who's in the chat. I do appreciate that it's probably far too early for the majority of people who watch my channel. And it's probably not great timing even for people in the UK. But people can catch it on the replay. So I'm going to try and keep this to about an hour so that it's watchable on a replay. So let's have a look who's in the chat. Joe, Sandra, Amanda, Sharon, Vi, them versus us. Interesting. Dawn, ASMR, Tingled, Pink, Just Tom, Jim, CW, The Wheels on the Bus, I Love Snow, Journey Takes a Trip, Jane, Irene, Magical Mother. See how much you can deal with today. Yeah, it's heavy, but it's interesting. JD, Blambriel, Nurse Fifi, Anna. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read from the live updates from both Lancs Live and Lancashire Post. Lancashire Post have been doing very brief updates, but they're more frequent. And they've been catching some really interesting little points that I think are just worth putting out there. And then Lancs Live are doing kind of whole paragraphs worth of information. So I'll start with Lancs Post, but I just want to read this from Lancs Live. It's confusing, Lancs Live and Lancs Post. And I'll put these 2 links in the description box as soon as the stream finishes. So, okay. So the hearing was originally scheduled to last for 2 days, and that timeline remains in place. Today's proceedings are due to begin at 10, and they did start promptly. And the inquest is expected to hear from a mental health expert and then from Nicola's GP, so her general practitioner. Her sister, Louise Cunningham, is also expected to speak with Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, the final witness. But Nicola's parents also wanted to speak. So they've actually come in and spoken as well. We then expect Coroner Dr. James Adderley to spend around 2 hours considering all the evidence before delivering his conclusion. It may come as a short form phrase or a longer narrative which offers more detail and context. Lancashire Constabulary is expected to release a statement upon completion of the inquest. Yes, the conclusion will contain the manner of death, yes. So we'll find that out at the coroner's conclusion. Okay, so we'll switch to Lank's post and we'll start at the beginning. So the day starts with a request for Nicola's parents, Ernest and Dot, to give evidence today, particularly regarding January 26th, the day before she went missing. And then Nicola's GP is the first person to give evidence, and that is Dr. Rebecca Gray. So Dr. Gray says Nicola presented with low mood and anxiety in December 2018. So that's a few years ago. And was given propranolol in February of the following year. So that would be February 22. As a beta blocker, it is designed to change the way your body responds to some nerve impulses. Okay. I don't know anything about that particular medication, so I can't comment on that. I don't know. How is it possible to float 6 minutes to the weir and also die within seconds of hitting the water by drowning? When the lungs fill with water, a person sinks. The two statements are contradictory. No, they're not. I think what actually went on is that she was unconscious within 20 to 30 seconds. So she's beyond the point of no return, quite frankly. But it would take a couple of minutes for her heart might stop, but it will take a couple of minutes for all brain activity to cease. And within that time, there is possibly some breaths taken and it maintains some air in the lungs. Also, once you're in a current, you are buoyant, at least for a short period of time. And also her clothes would have provided some buoyancy until they became waterlogged. So I think it was probably enough time to get her certainly out of the immediate search area. If not completely over the weir, then out of the immediate search area. But once the current takes you, it's not like a still body of water. In a river, that river is constantly moving. So unless a body gets snagged on something, it has that probability that it is going to move regardless, because the current is stronger than the body is dense. So no, it's not contradictory at all. It's just basically understanding how rivers work and how bodies move in bodies of water. Okay. All right, menopause. In July 2021, Nicola presented with symptoms of the menopause. Dr. Gray discussed starting hormone replacement therapy, and in October 2021, the treatment began. I'm way older than Nicola, and I don't even know what the symptoms of the menopause are. I don't appear to be having any of them. I'm way older than her. But some people start the menopause relatively early, I guess. Okay, Nicola reported having headaches due to the HRT, a common side effect. The preparation of the HRT changed and the headaches subsequently went away. So they tweaked her medication, I think that means. In January 2022, she presented with fatigue. However, she said she felt more anxious. This was put down to the stress of a new job. Blood tests all came back as normal. She was offered help for her mental health, but wanted to see how things settled down. So that's a year before all this dreadful tragedy happened. So she had been suffering with symptoms of the menopause for a couple of years. She had some anxiety, but that was due to stress of a new job. She was getting back into her career. She'd had some time out from her career to have her 2 little girls. And now her 2 little girls were older. Like the youngest one was 6. So she'd gone back to work and kind of was building up her business. So that's ultimately stressful. Well, the current was moving at 1 meter per second. That's from the dive expert yesterday. So if the current is moving at 1 meter per second, then on the day that she disappeared, then anything that had some buoyancy that was taken by that current would also move at 1 meter per second. It's very, very basic physics. Very basic physics. Currents can pull you down even in the calmest of dams. Well, there wasn't a dam. There's no dam in the River Wyre. So that's irrelevant, I'm afraid. I was on propranolol for palpitations, panic attacks, anxiety, depression. It didn't help. I had to be weaned off them. Okay. I've never suffered from anxiety, so I can't even tell you. I can't give any comment. I don't know. Okay. So when asked, Dr. Gray says there's nothing in her notes from 2012. So she's gone back all the way back to 2012. I don't know why 2012. Presumably that's when Dr. Gray started to become her GP. I don't know. But there's nothing in her notes of feeling suicidal or considering self-harm. And then we jump forward to the issues just a couple of weeks before she went missing. So the January 10th and then a January 11th issue that we didn't know about. Well, certainly I didn't know about. Propranolol. Somebody else said that. Somebody else said that yesterday. And I kind of assumed that maybe she was given that medication for headaches. But I don't know. I just can't comment. I don't know the drug at all. Yeah. Yeah. I know. Nobody hitting the like button. You got to be hitting the like button. I think it all makes sense. But then Ashley's still confused. From Manchester, but listening from Cyprus. Oh, wow. So anxiety disorder. Okay. All right. Okay, so Nicola attended the Fleetwood Walk-in Centre on January 11th due to an injury to the back of her head after a fall. Complaining of increased drowsiness and vomiting, she was sent to A&E, which is the emergency room, where a CT scan came back normal. So she'd fallen, what, 16, 17 days before she was reported missing on January 27th. So increased drowsiness and vomiting probably would be some concussion, but she had a CT scan and that was normal. So she did have a history in the very, very recent past of taking a fall. So I think that's very significant, if you want my opinion. Okay, so Nicola's sister gives evidence. Louise Cunningham, Nicola's sister, is the next person to give evidence. Louise breaks down as she pays tribute to her sister, meaning Dr. Adley opens with a different question about how much of a planner she was. So this is Louise talking. She started her career again as a busy mum. She always had things under control. She got a Springer Spaniel calendar every Christmas, and every January it would go from the last calendar to the new calendar and note everything down and colour code it. So a planner, I wonder, people like that who are anxious and want to do everything right and just plan everything, I think do suffer from stress, or are more likely to suffer from stress because they put too much on themselves. That's just a general, I suppose, a general comment from me. Yes, I'm vegan, just Tom. So she'd had a fall. She'd had a fall and was reporting dizziness and sickness. So whether that was a result of the fall and was a mild concussion, then I don't know. Wait, what? Okay, we'll get there. We're doing this in a time-ordered fashion. So this is still Louise. Willow was like a third child. Willow is nearly 8, and I'm not sure Nikki missed a dog walk. She would always find time in her day. Going back to summertime, she discussed she was having problems with the HRT and having bad headaches. So this is in the previous year. She couldn't seem to get the balance right. She was having trouble sleeping some nights, using anything to try and relax her. She brought it up, issues with her medication again around Christmas, and was talking about using more herbal methods. She had a blip over Christmas, but she went back on the HRT in January and back to work and back to normal Nikki. So Christmas time was difficult for her. That was when she had that increased use of alcohol that concerned her family. She never confided in me about any suicidal thoughts. When asked about the not wanting to be here comment, which we'll talk about, because that's discussed more on the Lancs Live commentary. When asked, her sister said she doesn't recall her saying that on January the 10th. Now, January the 10th is the time when the welfare check was done. And it was Louise who called the ambulance. So she said she was fuming with me for calling the ambulance, saying I'd overreacted. Maybe I had, but it was a bit of a wake-up call. She was then back to work and starting taking the HRT medication again. Okay. With the harness found, Louise insists her sister would not leave Willow to fend for herself at any point and would not have gone in the River Wyre by choice. Absolutely not. There's no way Nikki would leave Willow unattended by herself. I don't think she'd ever go in the river intentionally. Okay, so she last saw her sister on January 13th, and the siblings were planning a spa day right up to January 27th. I literally confirmed it and booked it, but she didn't pick up the message, Louise says, as she breaks down for a second time. It's so, so sad. Nicola had a really positive meeting about her career with Love Homes the day before she went missing. She was in good spirits and was looking forward to her career. And then it's Paul Ansell, her partner's turn to give evidence, and he's the last scheduled witness. However, the parents were allowed to give evidence after Paul. So like this live update, they're missing a lot of the detail because they're just giving very, very brief updates. So we'll fill in a lot of the blanks and the confusion when we do the Lancs Live, because they've done longer. They're spaced apart, but they've done longer commentary. I don't know there's evidence of that, Julie. I really don't think there's evidence of that from what we're seeing. Okay. So this is Paul Ansell. The blip over the Christmas period happened, but in January she was back to herself, looking forward to the future, and everything was on the up. She spent most of last year doing hard work to build the business up, and she was starting to see the rewards of that. So she was self-employed, but she would take on like contracts or, I don't know, work with other mortgage companies. So the work call she had from 9 to 9:30 was with Exclusivity Mortgages. They were somebody she was kind of, I don't know, contracted with or something. So she had 2 meetings planned on the Friday, January 27th, after a successful day before. She was ready for the day ahead. Everything was in a good place, said Paul. Okay. Dr. Radley asked about Willow's harness that was found halfway between the bench and the river. Paul says, we always take the harness off Willow before going through the gate into the fields and carry that around the fields with us, then put it back on when you get back to the gate. She must have maybe put the phone on the bench and gone to put the harness back on Willow. I think that's what happened. I do. Okay. So Paul, the latest to be asked about any potential suicide thoughts. There were a couple of throwaway comments during the blip period, but nothing that gave me any concern. I think there's always concern, or should be, when somebody makes a comment about ending their own life. But I think probably if you think that somebody's got over that and is now in a good place, then you look back and you think, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. So Dr. Adley going over the timeline as people became aware of Nicola was missing. Paul Ansell rang his partner 6 times in 7 minutes and also sent her a WhatsApp message saying, have you got lost? Nicola was self-employed but worked for Exclusivity Mortgages. She was securing business with Love Homes and Concept Homes as well through word of mouth. She had worked hard to pass her exams again, having been out of the industry for several years. According to Mr. Ansell, she was pleased to have that level of independence again, and things were only looking up. So, like I said at the beginning, she'd taken a career break. Yeah, she did have a good life, yeah. But obviously, people who are suicidal, they don't see any of the positives. Nothing makes sense to them anymore. So we do have to consider that as a possibility, and I'm sure the coroner will be very carefully considering that as a possibility. Okay, so she was an incredible mum. She would have been taking her daughter for her first street dancing class in Blackpool on the Saturday before a play date. So if you remember from yesterday's testimony, one of Nicola's friends said that they'd exchanged comments, messages about setting up a play date for their children. And that was due to happen on the Saturday. But before that play date, according to Paul, Nicola had also planned to take one of the daughters to a street dancing class. And then their other daughter was set to be at practice all day. ahead of a gymnastics competition. So again, she's kind of throwing herself into all of these things with her daughters, like very carefully planned life. And I do think that adds stress to your life when you're like that. I do. Maybe it's because I can't be like that I think like that. I don't know. She was an incredible mum, added Paul, who had known her for 12 years. Paul Ansell breaking down as the family lawyer takes him through some of the things he'd said about his partner, including her love for a family walk and a meal out. He was granted a 5-minute break. So he returned after a brief break and is taking us through her habits during the Friday video call she was on and when Willow wore the harness during a walk. Okay. Nicola was described as a holiday type swimmer who would swim in a pool, not getting her hair wet, with her sunglasses on. So that doesn't sound to me like somebody who could handle water that was almost freezing with a current having fallen in onto rocks. She's not a survivalist. She's a holiday swimmer. So swimming in a pool is very different than swimming in a river or swimming in any body of water. And even the strongest swimmer, if you go into cold water shock, you're not able to come back from that because you lose that consciousness very, very quickly. Paul Ansell confirms she was taking her HRT and had stopped drinking. Paying a final tribute, he says, anyone who met Nikki instantly loved her. So Paul Ansell's evidence concludes now Nicola's parents, Ernest and Dot, will speak as an addition to the planned witnesses. Ernest and Dorothy were at Nicola and Paul's home on the Thursday, so the night before she went missing. They picked the girls up every Thursday. Everything was just normal, says Dorothy, who then breaks down as she recalls saying her goodbye to her daughter for a final time. Ernest said she was full of it, really happy after securing a business deal. So she'd secured a business deal the day before she went missing. She was a great daughter, sister and mother. We couldn't ask any more from her. Sophie Cartwright, QC, the family barrister for the Bulleys, is now presenting her final submissions to Dr. James Adley after all witnesses have been called. The only appropriate conclusion is accidental death. What happened on the riverbank shortly after 9:18 a.m. was a tragic accident. Following her statements, Dr. Adley will retire for a couple of hours to consider his findings. Okay. There has been more rumours and suspicion and speculation around Nikki's death, but the family are very clearly of the view and submit to you that the rumours and speculation is allayed completely when looking at all the evidence. You are being very optimistic there because I've seen a lot of absolute idiots online trying to cling with that final fingernail to their pet conspiracy theory because they don't bother considering the evidence. Okay, clarification around the scream. Bearing in mind the timing of the screams mentioned in yesterday's evidence, the family submit through their barrister that they are irrelevant to the proceedings. Okay, interesting. We'll now break until 2:15, where Dr. Adley will return with his findings. So 2:15. All right, let's look at Lancs Live. Now, they've given some much more detailed submissions to their live reporting. So we'll go through this. No, because Willow wasn't wet. Crazy, aren't they? They're absolutely crazy. Will be a glossy over conclusion. Well, it'll be the conclusion that best fits the evidence. I think look, I've said this all along, since February 6th, when I went to St. Michael's on Wire for the first time, and we'd started to get a more accurate understanding of the timeline and the surroundings, and it's one of the most simplest cases I've ever covered. It's simple. It's a very straightforward case. And I don't understand why people are making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Yeah. Yeah. Can't be homicide. We've known from the day Nicola's autopsy was done that this wasn't a homicide investigation, because it wasn't a criminal investigation. It was a coroner's investigation. A coroner's court is not a criminal court. So we've known that since then, but people just haven't been able to seemingly understand UK law, even though I've made video after video after video to the point of being nauseous about even having to talk about it again, because people don't want to understand the law. Anyway, okay. Family arriving in court. Now told Nicola's parents Dot and Ernest were going to speak during proceedings. Okay, all right. So we've got some detail here that is important to cover. So Dr. Rebecca Gray has been asked to step up to give evidence first. She works at Great Eccleston Health Centre and was Nicola's GP. She explained that Nicola had previously spoke about anxiety and had been prescribed antidepressants and beta blockers. In January 2022, Nikki presented with fatigue and said she felt more anxious. She said she had started a new job and was finding it particularly stressful. So remember, she'd had a career break, so she was just getting back into work and starting a new business. So obviously stressful. The GP ordered some blood tests, which were all normal. Dr. Gray said there was no mention in the records of Nikki reporting any suicidal feelings or self-harm. In February 2022, Nicola spoke of struggling with sleep as a result of work stress. She described how her brain felt like it was overloaded. She tried taking Nitol, which is like a over-the-counter sleeping medication. So it's over-the-counter, so it's pretty mild. Herbal tea and a sleep spray. I don't know what a sleep spray is. On January 11th, 2023, Nikki went to the walk-in centre at Fleetwood and said she had fallen and banged her head the previous night. So the previous night was the night that the welfare check was done, and was feeling drowsy and had been sick. She was sent to A&E at Blackpool Victoria Infirmary, where a CT scan found no internal injury. So she'd fallen over on the night of the 10th. So security measures in place. Okay, so this is what the Lancs Post missed. They missed this completely, and this is really important. Teresa Lewis-Levy is next to speak. She is a mental health clinician who was involved with the home treatment team and the Synergy vehicle, which is the mental health emergency response vehicle. Miss Levy explained that on January 10th, 2023, just 2 weeks before Nicola went missing, her sister, Louise Cunningham, called the mental health team and asked for some assistance with her sister. The family was concerned with her increased alcohol use and the impression she didn't want to be here. The team arrived at Nicola's home at 7:30 p.m. with a police and paramedic also there. According to Miss Levy, Nicola was appropriately dressed and appeared to be intoxicated. Nicola told her she had lost weight as a result of her increased alcohol use. The conversation with Miss Levy was quite brief, and Nicola said she was tired and wanted to go to bed. So Nicola herself didn't want any further action, I guess. Miss Levy said although Nicola was intoxicated, she wasn't slurring her words, but she was repetitive in saying she wasn't sure how this had happened, but wasn't able to quantify that with an explanation. Nicola was advised to go and see the GP the following day, but she said she couldn't as she was sorting her mortgage out. So work stuff, because she was a mortgage advisor. However, when Miss Levy spoke to Nicola's partner, Paul, he said there wasn't an issue with the mortgage and it wasn't something that was being done the following day. So I'm wondering whether it's something to do with her business, not the family's mortgage, but her business. I think there may have been some misunderstanding, but that's obviously just my speculation. No way to know that. When asked if Nicola appeared depressed, Miss Levy said, no, not that I could ascertain at the time. I don't know. I don't know whether there was something underlying, maybe. I don't know. But obviously, things were looking up from that 2-week period after that. So, you know, it was a wake-up call, I guess. No, the fall was an accident, not the welfare check. The welfare check was called in by Nicola's sister because of Nicola's increased alcohol use. So that was why the welfare check was done. But Nicola must have fallen either before that or after that. And then the day after, she went to A&E and they sent her to hospital to get a CT scan, which was normal. Exactly. But people just have to believe that Nicola Bulley was murdered, even though there's absolutely no evidence of it. The inquest has now moved on to the stage where family members are being invited to give evidence. First to speak is Nicola's sister, Louise, who breaks down in tears after being asked what type of person she was. After composing herself, she said Nicola was very much a planner and that she was just amazing. Every Christmas, Mum and Dad would buy her a Springer Spaniel calendar, and every January, Nikki would transfer everything onto the new one in a colour-coded system. It always worries me when people start colour-coding. It's too much. It's too much. If you colour code, just calm it down. You're prone to stress. She continued that having the girl. Oh, all right. Start that again. She continued before having the girls. She was a mortgage advisor. After the kids, she resat her exams. She was just getting back into a routine of work again and was absolutely brilliant. According to Louise, Nicola had a special bond with Willow. She said he was like her third child. Willow's a girl, so she was like a third child. She would always find time in her day to take Willow for a walk. Asked about Nicola's mental health, Louise said Nikki did have a bit of a blip over the Christmas period with her HRT. However, come January, she had started to get back to her normal self. She was back on the HRT and back to work and back to normal Nikki. Her drinking did increase. However, she said her sister never ever confided her about suicidal thoughts or anything related. Asked by the coroner whether she, I presume that means whether she would leave the dog in the field if she ever did consider ending her life, Louise replied, absolutely not. There's no way Nikki would leave Willow unattended. Discussing January 10th, when an ambulance was called, Louise said it was a bit of a wake-up call for her, I think. She was fuming with me for calling the ambulance. She thought I'd overreacted, and maybe I did. Honestly, I think she did as well. I think she did, honestly. But she's my sister, and I was concerned. She started to get back to normal after that. Louise last saw Nicola on Friday, January 13th, having stayed with her sister for a few days after the incident on January 10th. So they seem to be quite kind of concerned, very concerned family, maybe just a little bit too much. It would drive me insane to have a sister like that. Sister calling an ambulance. It'd do my head in. But that's just me. That's just me. Okay, Louise told the coroner that the two sisters had childhood nicknames for each other. Nicola was Clacker and Louise was Tosh. On the morning Nicola disappeared, Louise texted her sister on WhatsApp and they were talking about booking a spa day. Louise booked the trip that morning, texted her at 8:52 a.m. and then signed off the text, Tosha. Louise began crying as she said, literally, I was saying it was booked, but she never picked up the message. Well, she went on that work call, didn't she? And then, sadly, the tragedy happened. The sisters were due to go to Ribby Hall for a spa day. I go to Ribby Hall. I don't go to the spa, though. Ribby Hall's great. Shout out to Ribby Hall Village. On March 18th, using a voucher Nicola's daughter brought her for Mother's Day in 2022. Sophie Cartwright, QC, representing the family, said, would it be fair to say you were incredibly close sisters? To which Louise said yes. The barrister concluded, not just incredibly close, but you come from a very loving family. You were brought up down south, but Mum and Dad moved north to be near their girls. We talked about hobbies, but is it fair to say Nikki's hobby was family? Louise responded yes. Louise went on to explain she was wearing Nicola's dress today in the inquest. The parents had given it to Nicola for Christmas, but she didn't like it, so gave it to Louise. According to Louise, Nicola worked for Love Homes in Garstang and had really successful work meeting the day before she disappeared. She was excited about her career, Louise added. So next up to speak is Paul Ansell. Asked to confirm that he was Nicola's partner, he replied, I am, making a distinction between past and present tenses. He is very softly spoken and sat with his arms crossed on the table in front of him. After the mental health blip, Nicola was back to her usual self and everything was on the up. The night before she went missing, she was full of beans. Paul reveals he works from home as an engineer for a US company and had been working until 1 a.m. the night before Nicola disappeared. So 1 a.m. the morning of the 27th. The coroner asked about the morning she went missing. It was just a normal morning, and he replied yes. She would always do 2 loops of that field before heading back to the bench and picking the car up from school. So just a normal morning. Attention is now turned to the issue of the harness, which was removed from Willow and found by the bench where Nicola's phone was. This had been the subject of speculation and conspiracy theories. Asked why it would be removed, Paul said, we would always take the harness off before going through the gate. Because she's a Springer, she's very erratic and into the bushes. So everything that is on her could get caught. So we used to take it off, exactly as I said. As someone who has a Springer, as someone who, until relatively recently, had a Springer that wore a harness because she pulled on a lead. So the harness was just a little bit kinder to her. And once she stopped pulling on her lead so much, then I don't use the harness. But did you ever see Cassie with a harness on? No, because harnesses get caught on stuff. They are dangerous. When Springer Spaniels go flushing, what they're doing in those bushes, they're not being erratic. They're doing what they're bred to do, which is flush birds. They're bird dogs. They're bird dogs. So they go jumping in the bushes. They're flushing. Oh, Cassie yesterday caught a bird mid-flight. I mean, I just was astonished. Absolutely astonished. A bird, it just flew from the tree behind my backyard and just flew that little bit too low. And Cassie just sprung into the air, caught it mid-flight, and I got it off her, but it had its neck broken. And it's like, I don't believe I saw that. I don't believe I saw that. It was insane to watch. She just literally sprung up. I mean, she can catch a ball in the air, and it was just like, I couldn't believe it. But that's what springers are bred to do. So absolutely the right thing to do to take a harness off a dog that displays flushing behaviours, or terriers that display grounding behaviours, Dachshunds, terriers, dogs that are bred to go to ground and go underground to find prey. Take the harness off. It's dangerous. It really is. They get snagged on stuff, especially underground. Don't let your dog underground in a harness, please. Even a collar. It's only now, in the last week, that and Cassie's now 2, that I've put a collar on her, and I'm trialing a collar in the fields, but I'm trialing it because I'm not convinced that even a collar's safe. But legally, you're meant to wear a collar and a tag if you're a dog, which is nonsense because all dogs have got to be legally microchipped. Anyway, I digress. All right. Okay. Asked why the harness was in the grass and the phone on the bench, she replied, when she got back to the bench, she was still listening to a conference call. She must have put the phone on the bench and then gone to put the harness back on Willow. Yeah, and I just think she tripped. At 10:30, roughly an hour after Nicola is believed to have entered the water, Paul sent her a text asking, have you got lost? At 10:50, the children's school called him to say her phone and Willow had been found. The coroner also references Ring doorbell footage, which shows Paul leaving the house around this time. Sophie Cartwright asked Paul to explain more about the successful meeting Nikki had with Love Homes in Garstang. The day before she had gone missing, she had agreed to be their sole mortgage advisor. She came home in amazing spirits. Nicola worked for herself as a mortgage advisor, but had built up relationships with various companies such as Love Homes, Concept Living, a new build construction company, and Exclusivity Mortgages. Paul revealed Nicola had a meeting planned at 11 a.m. the day she disappeared. She then had quite a lot of paperwork to get ready for another meeting that afternoon. She would always come home from her walk around 10 to 10:15. He added, when it got to 10:30, I started to feel a bit concerned. Yeah, they get stuck. I used to have a Yorkshire Terrier. I mean, not one of those little... I did have a little tiny one, but he got killed. But Bella, who died last year, she was nearly 16 when she died, she was a proper terrier. Like, she came from working stock. She wasn't like a show animal, you know, those little tiny Yorkies with the long fur. She was a proper terrier, proper working terrier. And she'd go after anything. She'd go everywhere. Okay, the inquest has broken for a brief comfort break after Paul began to cry while giving evidence. He was comforted by the coroner's office before a decision was made for a brief pause. Moments earlier, Paul has said Nikki was an incredible mum. She was an amazing mum. The family's barrister, reading from his statement, said that their daughters were her absolute world. She continued, she enjoyed nothing more than a walk with Willow in the countryside or a family walk in the hills, followed by a nice meal out. We are back underway after the brief pause. Paul has now completed his evidence. He explained that Nicola, had she stopped drinking when she disappeared? That's bad grammar. He explained that Nicola had stopped drinking when she disappeared and was back taking her HRT medication. Paul said in his statement she was grateful for every day. She was an amazing mum and partner, and this gave her huge security. She focused on the important things and did the right thing by everyone. She was well respected by all who knew her. Everyone loved her. So now Nicola's parents, Ernest and Dot, are now speaking. They sat side by side next to Louise, Nicola's sister. Mrs. Bulley cried as she recalls the last time she saw her daughter. The night before she went missing, Mr. and Mrs. Bulley had been watching the girls at Nicola's home while she was in a Zoom meeting. Before we went home, we went to the front door and gave them all a kiss and a cuddle. Mr. Bulley added, we gave her a hug as we always do with our children and with our grandchildren. Mr. Bulley described giving Nicky a kiss and a hug. As he started to cry, Mrs. Bulley adds sadly for the last time. Mr. Bulley said as a little girl, Nicky was always dancing around in her tutu, and as a teenager, she wasn't any trouble. Mr. Bulley had to take several pauses as he speaks to compose himself. She put so much into passing those exams. It wasn't easy bringing up a family and looking to combine the two together, but we knew she could do it. The family's barrister, Sophie Cartwright QC, is now making submission to the coroner regarding possible conclusions available to him. The coroners are encouraged, where possible, to use what is known as a short form conclusion in varying contexts, as opposed to being options available today. This grammar is terrible. These can be conclusions such as accidental, misadventure, suicide, drug-related death. Miss Cartwright, QC, tells the coroner the conclusion he should return is one of accidental death. She argued the phone evidence, post-mortem, expert evidence, and eyewitness accounts all point to Nicola's death being an accident. I agree. What occurred on the riverbank was probably sometime shortly after 9:18 a.m. was a tragic accident for Nicky. It's clear from the evidence that at 9:18, Nicky increased the volume on the Zoom call, and it appears that what happened after that somehow be linked to the location of the dog harness found on the steep part of the slope. There has been much rumour, suspicion, and speculation. The family are of the view that has been allayed by the evidence. The family are comforted by the evidence that Nicky's death would have been very soon after she entered the water. The barrister urges the coroner to find at approximately 9:30 Nicola Bulley, on the balance of probabilities, died in the river due to an accidental death. She also urges the coroner to consider that the screams heard are not connected to Nicola's death and says they do not have any relevance to how Nicola came to her death. Those screams could have been anything, quite frankly. We don't know. That brings to an end all the evidence, and they will resume at 2:15. 2:15. Well, because it can't be confirmed if those screams were Nicola. And maybe they don't want those to be added into the conspiracy theories. I don't know. I personally, if I was the family, I would consider the possibility that it was Nicola tripping and falling and just let out a scream. But once she was in the water, as I said yesterday, drowning victims don't scream. They can't scream. People who are drowning and choking do it silently, sadly. Meds for sleep apnea, they make me very relaxed. I can just nod off any time. I can nod off any time. I can sleep on a clothesline, me. But then again, I've always been like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe they just don't want to think about it. I don't know. I would consider it. If I was Nicola's family, I would consider that scream was her falling in. But I don't know. It can't, it can never be confirmed one way or another. It's just something that was noted by a couple of witnesses. So obviously, everything that the witnesses report have to be considered. So let's have a look what's been said in other media. Look here. I don't think we've missed anything really important. So that's not been updated for an hour. You see, these live updates, I mean, it's great that the media are doing this, but we've only got their word. Like, we don't have it word for word. Like, if I'd gone to the inquest, I can write pretty fast. I was just going to literally write word for word and then read it to everyone. I know what they're doing. I'm ignoring them and choose to respond to them, and they just do it more. So I'm aware of what's going on in the chat. And it's people with very childish mentalities in the chat who are bleating and are upset because their pet conspiracy theory has been thwarted. So now they have to admit they were wrong, and they can't do that. So they come into chats like mine trying to disrupt. So just ignore them. Just ignore them. I know, Beach Fairy. I would mod you. I can't though, because I've not got my other computer. I'd have to log on to. I have to faff around with Studio and then get the stream up to be able to mod people. Hold on. Okay. Because I can't do that on StreamYard. All right. Beach Fairy. Okay. Beach Fairy, you're now welcome to the moderation team. Thank you for offering. Yeah, don't feed the trolls. That's exactly it. Do not feed the trolls. Because that's what they want. They want validation because they feel very small and insignificant in their lives. So They need validation from the grown-ups. So just don't respond. Just ignore them. Why have the family asked for it? Asked for what? The family are allowed to suggest to the coroner what decision. Obviously, the coroner doesn't have to take it. But I was asked when I gave evidence at a family member's inquest. And it was very, very obviously a suicide. Very obviously. But the coroner still asked me, would I like to suggest a verdict or a conclusion? And I said, there's no other conclusion other than suicide. Now, there was no other conclusion. If I'd have said, oh, he was murdered for this, this, and this reason, the evidence didn't show anything suggestive of murder at all. But I could have suggested it, and it would have been turned down. It would have been ignored. She'd have been very nice about it. You know, she'd have said, look, the evidence doesn't suggest to me, but the family they're allowed to contribute to the testimony because it's not a criminal court. It's a coroner's court. It's very different from a criminal court. Now, I don't know whether it's because things are very different in other countries that people are struggling with this, or because it's, you know, if you're in the UK, you've never gone through an inquest, and thankfully, you might never have to, hopefully, because they're not pleasant. They're not pleasant. Welcome to memberships. Vi Hayes. Thank you, thank you. I'm Scottish and never knew that, thanks. In Scotland, things might happen slightly differently. I don't know. Because the coroner's court that I know the rules of, because I've gone through this process myself personally, covers England and Wales. Scotland have slightly different a legal system. So do Northern Ireland. So things like coroner's inquests might be handled slightly differently in Scotland. So don't feel bad about not knowing this. The majority of people don't know things like this because they've never been through it, or they don't have this system in their country, and that's understandable. And that's why I've gone through these details again and again and again, video after video, because people seemingly just did not understand it. And I hope that people have learned from this experience, and maybe can go back to my videos and watch them with an open mind and think, oh yeah, I understand it now. I don't know. I've just tried to put the facts out there, to put the law out there, and people don't want to listen. Totally different in Denmark. Okay. I'm sure it is. Every country has their own process. Anyway, right, I'm going to keep this kind of to an hour. I'll be back at 2:15. So I'm going to set up a new stream, and it'll start at 2:15. So in an hour and, well, in about an hour. And we're going to be live when the coroner does his verdict. Now, obviously, it won't be televised. There's no cameras in the court. It's not like we can listen in, but it will be what the media says. So the conclusion will come via the media shortly after 2:15, and then Lancashire Constabulary are going to give a statement as well. So I'll see you in just over an hour. So yeah, I'll see you then. Please come back. Tell your friends, tell your friends that the coroner, if they're interested in the Nicola Bulley case, I will be live to cover the coroner's verdict. So I'll see you very soon. Thank you to the mods. Welcome to the new member. Don't think I added any donations, but that's fine. I don't think I did. I'm sorry if I missed one. Okay, I'm gone. I'll see you very soon. Bye, guys.